Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. We've got another banger episode lined up for you today with an incredible guest mentor. And what I love about our guest mentorship episodes is that my audience gets to learn right alongside me. They get to learn about topics that I am not an expert in. I get to ask all the questions that not only do I want to know the answers to, but I think when I try to ask questions, I'm trying to ask questions that I think my audience would want to ask if they were in my seat as the host. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome John Horn from the StubGroup to the podcast. Welcome, John.
Hey, Jason. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for joining me for the ride today. And before we get into StubGroup, you're the CEO, before we get into what you do, how you do it, what makes you unique, why don't you tell me and the audience how you came to be in this industry? Because I always ask this opening question because in my experience, I've been in e-com for 25 years now. Everybody has a different story. There's no consistent pathway that people come to be in this industry. They come from every walk of life. They come from every discipline. And most of the people that I know well in this industry fell into the industry one way or another. I know I certainly did. It was not a plan that I had, a grand master plan. I fell into the industry through a mutual friend that was working in the industry at the time. And that's how I originally got in the industry. What's your story?
Yeah, no, similar here in that I didn't grow up thinking, okay, I'm going to get into digital advertising. I enjoyed communication and different things like that, writing and so forth. Didn't really know where that was going to take me. And the way I got into the industry really was a little bit over a decade ago at this point. And I'd worked in some various kind of general marketing related things. I'd done blue collar and white collar, so forth. I was approached by my brother and a good friend of his who were starting this company called StubGroup. And they had identified this market of digital advertising really back in the day and still off very much today as well, with a lot of focus on Google Ads. And they saw a lot of opportunity where there were so many businesses moving from the traditional advertising over to digital advertising, and you just needed help with figuring that out and with stewarding their budgets and figuring out this whole new landscape. And so they started StubGroup, and I got to come on as employee number one. And together we've gotten to just grow things over the last decade plus and figure things out as we go.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. And where did the name come from? StubGroup. What was that? Stub your toe. If you don't work with us, you're gonna get hurt. To prevent yourself from getting hurt, come and work with us instead.
Yes, I don't want to get that question. I wish I had a super creative answer to give you, but the kind of the raw reality is Stub is the first part of the last name of one of the founders. And so it just went StubGroup, and that's where it came from. And ever since then, we've been StubHub to half of our clients. So it might have done a different route with the name back in the day, but that's where we're at now.
Love it. Love it. It's memorable branding, if nothing else. So it's like Google didn't mean anything to the world until it did either. Branding, I find, doesn't really matter until it does. And as long as you can trademark something and put your stamp on something and build a brand, that's usually all that matters. Now, do you guys only specialize in performance marketing with Google Ads, or do you do all forms of performance marketing, or are you like, you're a Google shop?
So it's another great question. Historically, a lot of our focus has been on Google Ads as well as other PPC platforms. So Meta Ads, Microsoft Advertising, etc. We also, as we've seen clients need more than just digital advertising and they like to have their needs solved by a one-stop shop, we have also expanded into other areas as well, things like SEO and email marketing and so forth. And so Google Ads is still generally what I talk about when I go to have a conversation like this, but we do have a lot of solutions beyond that for our clients as well.
Amazing. And I remember the days when I first started my e-commerce pure play many years ago. I managed all the Google Ads. I did the whole thing. And it was very early days, 5 cent per click ads. It was the Wild West. And it was easy. The interface was clean. An idiot with a couple hours on their hands, they could go through the Google AdWords, because it wasn't called Google Ads at that point. It was called Google AdWords. You could go through a little bit of online training and you could become an expert in the platform in a day kind of thing or less. And you could run them, you could turn them on, you could turn them off, you could easily manage the bidding, you could do your keyword research. It was all fairly straightforward, not a lot of competition. And it was like, I liken it to turning on a tap. You could have a startup, and we had a startup at that point, and it takes a while always for organic to start making an impact, and you'd have any representation in the search engines. And it was like, this is the quickest, easiest, fastest way we can just flick on a bid, instantly start getting traffic to the website, and instantly started, getting conversions. Because the reality is that when people clicked on your ad, at least back then, there wasn't as much content marketing being done. It was literally a transactional ad. People read the ad, they go, we know you sell this, I know I want this, I'm going to go there, and if the price is fair and you look trustworthy, I'm going to buy. So the path to conversion, it wasn't so much a funnel as it was a straight line. And it was cheap, it was easy, and it was fast. And that was really, for me, what made, we built our entire business on the back of Google AdWords. And within 18 months, we were at nearly $1 million worth of annual revenue built on the back of Google Ads, because there was no meta ads at that point. And so what I find interesting is that it seems that Google has, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and I think you can go down some conspiracy theory rabbit holes here, but regardless, the platform now, you almost have to have a PhD in the platform to run it. I tried to run some simple basic YouTube ads recently through the Google Ads interface, and I'm going to have to freaking hire an expert for this, because this is so damn hard to manage and understand the reporting and understand the placements, understand what you're paying, understand why you're paying what you're paying, how to set up geo-targeting, how to set up lookalike, like just the whole thing has exploded in complexity, certainly exploded in placement opportunities too. But it feels like Google has taken this attitude, and they've done the exact same thing with Google Analytics. When I first learned Google Analytics, almost any freaking idiot could understand it. It was that easy to use. Like, right? Universal Analytics was easy, right? Simple clickstream analytics. GA4, absolute train wreck. You might got to be a data scientist to be able to understand GA4 now. It's totally unusable for people that are not specialists in the space. It's not like you can log in and make sense of freaking anything, which is why I think a lot of brands now run Clarity as their primary analytics, Microsoft Clarity as their primary analytics platform, because GA4 is virtually useless unless you're a data scientist and unless you understand GTM and you can actually get things and tagged and inserted into the website. GTM is its own use. And I have this theory that one of the reasons why Google has done this, and they've just ramped up the complexity of their product, is because they really are telling webmasters or e-commerce site owners, just trust us. You don't need to figure this stuff out. It's all too hard. Either you go and pay someone like you to come and help us with this, or just trust us. We'll run the bids. We'll run the ads. We'll create the creative with Gen AI, and just trust us. Just give us money and trust us. And because it's more difficult now than ever before to assess their performance, right, and the value for money that they bring, a lot of people are blowing a lot of money on their platforms and they don't even realize it. What is your take?
Yeah, I have definite perspectives on the analytics side of things. Same take as yours as far as Universal Analytics. I spent tons of time in there, knew exactly how to use it. Everything was very clear. You're like, okay, I want to see what happened with traffic from this source. I want to see just whatever you want to see. You can go find it. And then GA4 is this absolute mess. And if you can find something, it takes forever. And I don't really trust what I do find, because I see so many situations where like the data is just wrong, flat out wrong. So yeah, it's been quite a frustrating transition over to GA4. I think my take on why that is, I have a couple of thoughts, and I think there's probably a couple things at play. I think part of it is Google has a track record with their interfaces for different things of just not really understanding how people use the interface and what they want to see. And I've seen this time and again with how they'll redesign the Google Ads interface. Guys, you're not making this easier. You're literally making this harder. And now I have to relearn something new, and it's not better than the last version. I've seen this with Google Merchant Center, where they did a redesign of that. Now it's Google Merchant Center next. And I don't think it's any easier to use. And there's just like weird design choices. Places with the same name in the menu, product, but one's like the analytics and one's a different area. And so constantly get confused on which one do I need to go in, and even their articles don't really elaborate. So you have to figure it out. So I think there's just frankly, dumb stuff like that, where there's a disconnect between the people who are designing the tools and just A, good UX principles, and then B, really understanding how people use the tools as consumers. So I think that's part of it. Definitely privacy, obviously, is playing a role as well, where Google is not wanting to get sued by people, and they are wanting to be ahead of the mark, let's say, when it comes to international privacy law, where we're going in the US, where a lot of different states are going with some of their laws like California and Virginia and so forth. And so I think some of why it's just harder to get information is because they're trying to make it harder for you to track down user specific information because they want to protect their own selves. So for me, I tend to think those two things are probably the biggest reasons for why it's such a mess, but there are certainly other valid reasons as well that could be, like you mentioned. It wouldn't be the first time that Google's tried to obfuscate things to make us trust the machine more and have less control over things. That's definitely been the trend in Google Ads as well.
And what's your take on the rise of the importance of zero and first party data for brands to be able to do a good job, to be able to personalize, to be able to take a little bit more control of their own destiny? The death of third party cookies has been seemingly coming for a decade. Google seems to keep pushing back the date on this because Flock didn't work and all their alternatives to cookies, quote unquote alternatives, to reinforce their walled garden and to frankly reinforce the walled gardens of all the major players who have tons of zero and first party data. Meta's got a metric ton. Apple's got a metric ton. All the major tech players have their own zero and first party data, not least of which because of their universal authentication platforms that are used across the internet to log into every website, it seems, on the planet because it's convenient, but you're also giving them your data at the same time in exchange for that. But it seems to me that Google is having a real hard time coming up with a genuine, legitimate alternative to third-party cookies, because the reality is the cookie is part of the foundation of the internet, just as important as the URL structure of the internet is. We've had cookies right since day one, and it feels the vast majority of consumers out there don't give a shit about cookies. If they did, they would be saying, I read some stats, I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but something like 98% or something like that of cookie warnings, people accept the cookies. It's almost never that people don't accept that and then they exit the website and don't transact with that website because they've got a cookie pop up. And so to my way of thinking, people actually don't give a shit about privacy either. If they gave a shit about privacy, they would not have this in their hip pocket or within a meter of their body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is the remote control of our lives. And talk about the ultimate tracking machine. That's it. And so the reality is, if I put my conspiracy theorist hat on for a moment, I think that this whole brouhaha about cookies has zero to do with privacy and has everything to do with reinforcing the walled gardens of the internet and the gatekeepers and the toll booths across the internet that Meta, Google, and other players are inserting themselves across the internet as gatekeepers, as paid gatekeepers of everything that happens on the internet. And obviously, it's a red herring, in my opinion, to talk about privacy because I don't think they give a shit about privacy. I don't think consumers give a shit about privacy. So what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I try as much as possible to follow the incentives. And obviously the incentive, like you're saying, is for each platform to have as much of a walled garden as possible. It is also to protect themselves legally and structurally. So I don't think that let's take Apple as an example. I don't think that they necessarily, out of the goodness of their hearts, have this great perspective that everything should be private and so forth and so on. But they use it as a marketing tool because it's a way for them to, say we're better than the others. And it's something that they can use to mess with people. iOS 14 updates that crushed Meta for a long time and took them forever to figure out how to come back from that from a targeting perspective. Apple was happy to do that in the name of privacy. So I would agree with you that most of what goes on with cookies and privacy and so much isn't necessarily stemming from a place of genuine concern about consumer privacy and more about framing, marketing, and competitors and trying to gain as much market edge as possible. The reality of all that, certainly, and how it impacts consumers is that it's harder and harder to have attribution these days and understanding those analytics of what does the journey look like for how people are finding out about your brand and then making a decision to purchase products from your brand. You mentioned about people often accepting cookies is quite interesting because from at least the anecdotal experience from what I've seen for some of our client websites and our own website, when people are given the option to reject, we do see a fairly high percentage of people clicking reject. Now, I think that's necessarily coming from a place of them really understanding what cookies are and caring that much. It's just more of a, oh, there's two options here. And no, I don't. Yeah, I'd rather you not know more about me. So sure, I'll click reject, that type of thing. But I do see that creating issues for traffic for a lot of our clients. Even our own website, StubGroup.com, we've seen that once we got more, let's say, compliant with cookie banners and whatnot, that we lost a lot of tracking visibility because people either weren't engaging with the banner at all or they were clicking reject. And then we weren't able to see that data in things like GA4, which has been fun trying to figure out the gaps in that data. So it's definitely a challenge. And I think going back to maybe your original question about the importance of zero party and first party data, I absolutely think that the more that brands can get that direct connection with consumers, email being one of the most obvious, phone number for texting, things like that, that is so important because it gives you that direct connection. It enables you to have a somewhat better ability to track people if you're using something like a CRM, for example, or if you've got, Shopify, obviously people are coming back and placing multiple purchases from the same email address. So it's very helpful there. And then it is also helpful as a targeting method in platforms like Google and Meta, where you can provide that data, upload it to it, send it through APIs, et cetera, and then leverage it for targeting, leveraging it for creating lookalike audiences and stuff like that. So yeah, very valuable to get that data.
And it feels that this, whether it be, let's say you're running Nosto or some other form of personalization platform, search merge personalization platform, obviously being able to pull in preference data where they explicitly give it to you, where you, let's say it's a hair care website, you put in a bunch of information about your hair color, about your hairstyle, or maybe about your ethnicity or the oiliness of your hair, whatever it might be. And then you, in exchange for that information, you're going to get product recommendations that are absolutely tailored for either your needs or just your preferences, right? And if you're willing to exchange, hey, I'm willing to give this website a little bit of information about what I'm actually looking for or what I'm looking to achieve, and then you tell me, okay, here's 3 products that we think is going to be perfectly targeted to your preferences or your needs, and then we're going to store that data as custom customer attributes that can persist across all of your browsing journeys every single time you authenticate with us. And we're actually going to give you a chance to update those preferences in my account as well. And so the rise of quiz commerce, which is what it's often called, seems to have been driven largely by not just trying to create a better customer experience, but trying to find creative ways and engaging ways to solicit more information from the customer that you've been given explicit access to by the customer to improve their customer experience. And that's the fair exchange that takes place. Do you think we're going to see ever more creative ways to get that data from customers willingly in exchange for, I don't know, a store credit or something to do with loyalty, or to unlock a new loyalty tier? Here, give me these extra 3 pieces of information that are going to help me not only tailor your experience, but you're going to unlock this next tier of bonuses where maybe now you get free shipping on every order. And it feels like this gamification model of you give me data, I give you value, but there being a very clear and transparent exchange of value for that data. That feels like where the world is headed directionally. Would you say that's true?
I think so. Yeah, I think for all the reasons you mentioned there, and I think also there's something to be said for the idea of sunk cost, not sunk cost fallacy in this case, but the idea of, hey, if I, as a consumer, if I've spent the time to give you some information, I've already invested, we have a relationship. I've invested into that, and you guys know me. So if I'm going to go back and purchase from somebody, I'm more likely to go where I've already spent time investing into that relationship and continue the relationship. So I think there's definite value there. I will also say, and this is very much speculation on my part. I haven't really worked in this space at all physically yet. But I think in terms of how AI is going to be introduced into this, I think we'll probably see a lot of scenarios where brands will be trying to use AI to make a lot of inferences about those things. So maybe I only have to give you a little bit of information, and then based upon that and based upon how I've been interacting with the brand and browsing and responding to messages and whatnot, there's probably a lot of additional things that the AI can infer and say, okay, I think they fit in this category, this bug, they're interested in this. And maybe there'll be situations where it'll be like, hey, we think you like these things, yes or no. And then you get that validation and see if the AI is correct. But I think there'll probably be more of that going on as well.
Yeah, and it feels like when we get, because I don't think conversational AI, everybody uses the term conversational AI, but I have yet to see a true conversational AI. I have met question and answer AI, where you ask a question and it gives you an answer, but two-way stream of consciousness conversation like we're having right now, have yet to see it. Nobody does it well. It's complete shit in terms of the UI UX. What's interesting is that I think we'll eventually get to a place, and that's probably less than a year away, where when I come to a website, I'll be able to select one of two interfaces. A traditional interface where I navigate around, maybe I have a search bar, whatever it is, and then I have a conversational interface where literally there's an agent that is created on the fly that is assigned to me and my account, and it remembers all the interactions it has with me, and then it will literally treat me as if I walked into a physical store, like when I walk into a jewelry store today, and the sales rep doesn't just splash out a bunch of stuff across the counter to show me. They ask me a bunch of questions first. They say, are you buying for yourself or someone else? Are you buying for a special event or occasion? Are you buying this for a wedding? What metal do you like? What stone do you like? What's your price? What is your budgetary expectations for this purchase? They ask you 10 different questions. Then they curate and they might pull out 5 things from the counter to show you that's tailored to what you're shopping for. I feel like conversational AI should hopefully eventually get to a place where that becomes the interface of the website, so that they can treat you literally like a concierge type service, as opposed to hunt, peck, find, like you go into I think the Ross experience is apt here, right? You go into a Ross store and there's just shit for Africa, right? And you walk through the place and it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, literally, because stuff is just strewn absolutely everywhere. And the competition in store, even getting down aisles is difficult, right? Because there's usually so many friggin' people there that just getting to things is difficult. And I feel like modern UI UX in many respects is still more like the Ross experience than it is like the jewelry store experience. And I feel like if we can move more towards a conversational experience with agentic AI concierge working alongside of us, that feels like a better experience once people like you help to get the traffic to the site in the first place. We want to greet them with an experience that is completely tailored for them, and I just don't think we're there yet. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how much of that kind of experience is developed internally to websites versus how much of that is done from a third party. ChatGPT is operator now, which I've been playing around with, which is more of the idea of the assistant that learns you and then goes and applies that across any website you go to. And will it be, okay, I go to, say, Walmart.com and they've got the AI and I start talking to it? Or is it, hey, I'm going to ChatGPT operator. Hey, go get the cat food that I always buy on Walmart.com. Go buy it or whatever. Or go tell me,
find the best deal, or who has it on special, or whatever.
Exactly. There'll probably be an aspect where websites will have to be identifying how tools like that are browsing them and optimizing for that to make sure that the AI agent that's coming externally onto the website is able to find their products properly and identify what is the best deal and stuff like that. So it'll be even more of optimizing for robots. Unfortunately, you'd think we got as far as we could in the SEO days we've come to, but yeah, it'll be a new level, I think.
It's interesting you say that, and I'd love your take on this too, because it feels like Google Ads themselves are going to have to pretty radically evolve to, I don't think even Google themselves yet knows exactly how in an agentic AI world they can insert ads into those experiences. I don't think they're 100% clear. In fact, I don't think anybody is 100% clear on that. And I think we had the same struggle when it looked like voice assistants were going to take over the world, and it looked like we were going to have voice assistants all throughout our home, and we were just going to be talking to AI. It felt like that at that point, Google was going to have if I asked Google Home a question and said, hey, what's my nearest shop where I can get Levi's 50 in this color and in this size at the cheapest price, where can I get that? And if it come back to you, oh no, before we give you the answers, we'd like to tell you about this crazy new thing, whatever, as an ad. It just doesn't work in that voice mediated environment. And so I feel, and as a result of that, ads never really became common in the voice assistant experience as a result of that, because it was so interruptive as part of that experience that it wasn't, maybe you could pay to have your spoken results further up the recommendation list. But I feel like agentic AI is going to go through a similar challenge in terms of adoption. And I feel like if there's any one thing that's slowing down agentic AI becoming the norm, it's all these companies also trying to figure out how they monetize that, right?
Yeah.
It's how do we monetize that? How do we insert the brands that we work with into these experiences in a non-interruptive, completely native way? And I think that somebody like a Meta, for example, has completely whiffed on this. When I think about I don't really watch videos on Facebook anymore because they always interrupt the video watching experience with a video ad, like 10 seconds in, and it's got the yellow countdown timer. I just immediately scroll on if I know an ad's coming. I don't even consume the ad. I just move on because it's so interruptive. It doesn't enhance my experience. It breaks my experience. And my concern is, and I wonder if it's your concern too, that in this new world of agentic AI, which is probably less than 12 to 18 months away from being pretty ubiquitous, what happens to people like you and me in the industry that are concerned about getting traffic to the brands that we support?
It's a really important question to ask. I agree that nobody, even the companies themselves, Google, OpenAI, et cetera, I don't think that they understand or they know really exactly how things are going to fold out. And you can see that even now with, hey, Google's got AI overviews, which come up for many of the searches that you do. And they've talked about, hey, we're going to insert ads into that. But that really hasn't happened yet because I think they're trying to figure out how to make that work. And I think a lot of it's going to come down, if we take a look at what the search experience has been, take Google as an example. Google has gotten very good at the advertisements that they show in the traditional kind of search functionality are very relevant, generally speaking, to what you search for. If I go and search for how do I buy an umbrella, I'm not going to see an ad for Geico car insurance. I'm going to see ads, here's how to buy an umbrella. So they've gotten very good at that. But it's still user directed. I'm choosing whether to click on that ad or click on the Google Maps or the organic listing or whatever. As we go more agentic, the agent is going to be choosing those things for me. If I do a search right now in ChatGPT and ask for something, it's deciding what to tell me. It's deciding if I say, hey, what's the best company in this vertical? It's going to somehow make some choices and show those to me. And right now, obviously, that's not monetized anyway from an advertising perspective. And I think what we'll probably see happen is more and more of, I think there'll be pay to play. I think there'll be, okay, I asked ChatGPT, what's the best restaurant in the area? And there'll be a little disclaimer of, hey, some of these results may be sponsored or whatever. And then I'll get some results and directions to those and whatever and menus. But the specific ones that they are choosing are probably going to be in some way impacted by the restaurant saying, okay, I want good placement. I'm going to pay. It's my guess. We're not there yet. We'll see obviously where things go. But with the amount of money that is being invested into this, into OpenAI, into Google's work with Gemini, et cetera, and with just how expensive it is, just from an execution standpoint, a buying the energy standpoint, they have to monetize at some point. They have to make money, and they have to make a lot of money. And subscription models are one way to do it, but I think it's been proven that there is a lot of money in the ad or choosing where you direct traffic to model. And so I do think we'll see that in some way. Just don't know exactly what ramification or permutation that's going to look like.
And are you concerned as a business at all with the drop off in Google search dominance as the preferred, not only browser, but also search engine? Those numbers are dropping. And I know, speaking for myself, I redirect. So in the Omnibox of my Brave browser, I have an app installed in the browser that automatically redirects to ChatGPT now. I have to intentionally go to Google search now to use Google for search. I use ChatGPT as my primary search engine now, and I know I'm not alone in that expectation. And I know Google Deep Research and a few other tools are trying to pull people back to Google for kind of their primary search capabilities or primary research capabilities. Are you concerned at all that Google is, at least right now, they seem to be playing catch up in the AI game, despite the fact that they probably have the best data set in the entire world to power their AI? I still think their user experience, I think their misfire of the rollout of Gemini, their woke results and responses hurt them. Culturally speaking, it really hurt them, where people started to go, can we even trust any kind of AI that comes from Google, because it seems like they're giving the woke response as opposed to the accurate response? Is it going to hallucinate on me worse than maybe the chat GPTs of the world? And can I go work with Grok instead, for example, and get a less woke AI and get a more accurate response? What is your overall take? Because I think, and I know it feels like I'm getting a little bit off topic here from Google Ads, but I think this is really relevant, because if people move away from Google in mass, full stop, as a result of their misfires on AI, then that's going to take huge amounts of potential traffic away from Google Ads to begin with. So what is your overall sense around where they're at in the AI arms race and where they go next to remedy this?
Yeah, a number of things I'd say to that. I would say, first of all, I'd say I'm more excited than concerned about those realities, because I love competition. I love there being competition. Google needs more competition, frankly. It pushes them to be better, as we've already seen, and it just creates more options. Google is still essentially a monopoly when it comes to searching for things. And that can have very real ramifications for businesses, because a little tweak in their algorithm, a little change, or we work with a lot of advertisers who accidentally violate a policy, or their account gets suspended, and now they have no traffic from Google Ads until they can figure out a way to fix that, if they can. And so there's just a massive dependency upon Google that can literally destroy businesses if something changes. And Google doesn't ultimately care, because they're just too large. They can't really care for every advertiser or every website they're sending traffic to. So I like the idea of there being alternatives, and also that creates opportunities. I would say arbitrage opportunities and really creative opportunities, where it can be like, if everybody's on Google, then all the advertisers are on Google. But if that traffic and search intent is spread across many different things, I can get creative and I can go find, I don't know, Perplexity. Hey, maybe I can find some great results from Perplexity because there's not a lot of other advertisers there. I can really hone in and capture and make things work the way they used to work 15 years ago in Google Ads, when it was still those Wild West days. So there's a lot of exciting opportunities there, I would say, as an advertiser and as a marketer. Now, if you are only doing Google Ads, then yes, I think there's reason to be concerned, because what exactly Google Ads looks like, I think, is going to change. And again, with more competition, that means more challenges, fewer people to reach, and so forth. And so I think it's important for the kind of service industry and the agency industry I'm in to not just be one solution, because we really don't know what each of these different solutions is going to look like in a couple of years. And I think the last thing that I would say there, see if I did not lose my train of thought here, is when it comes to the Google side of things, I'll be honest, I lost my train of thought.
That's all good. That's all good. I think you covered it really well. And to your point, what I love about AI today is that, for example, I've got almost 500 episodes of my podcast released. There is no good podcast search out there anywhere across the internet, even on Google. So if I want to find, apart from partnering with perhaps an AI platform that's specifically designed for creators, it is very difficult for even me. I might remember, I remember having this guest on, I remember having this company on the podcast, but I can't remember the episode number. Going back and finding that is an absolute nightmare. But right now, if I go to ChatGPT and I say, the eCommerce Edge podcast episode with XYZ person or company, it in seconds will come up with that result. Oh, we think you're referring to this episode. Here's the link. It'll even embed the YouTube video if it finds one. Like, it feels, because ChatGPT in particular is now multimodal capable, and it can interpret all formats of data and PDFs and CSVs, and it can interpret. The other day, it was amazing. I can take a screenshot. So I'm here in Mexico, and if I receive a document that's in Spanish and it's in a PDF, the traditional translation technologies don't work, because it's not plain text that can be interpreted by the browser, for example. I can take an image, I can take a shot of something with my phone and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you translate this for me? Or can you translate and summarize this for me? It is freaking amazing. And it does it in seconds because of its multimodal capability. So my sense is that AI specific and AI driven search, and like I asked the queries differently of ChatGPT. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that Google has trained me really well. And if I'm using Google, I search in a specific way that I know if I search in this way, I'm probably going to get the kind of results that I'm looking for. but I'm
Yep.
still being trained by ChatGPT on the best way to ask it questions to get the results that I'm looking for. And the way that I interact with it is very different to how I would typically interact with Google. And I think we're going to get to a point, and I'd love your thought on this, where I remember, and your audience and people you work with are probably too young to remember this, but I remember back in the day when people on their CV would put expert Googler. They literally would put that as a skill because in the early days, in order to get good results out of Google, you had to be really good at asking it really good questions to get really good answers. And so if you were an analyst or you were trying to find a specific answer to a specific question, you might have to ask Google three or four, you might have to refine your query 3 or 4 different times to get your answer. And I feel like today people put expert prompt engineer, AI prompt engineer on their CV because this is the modern version of being an expert Googler. But I feel like AI, give it another 12, 18, 24 months, and you won't need to be an expert prompt engineer. It will be able to interpret even the silliest or the most basic or the worst prompts, and it will be able to give you a very coherent, very accurate, very specific answer. And I feel like it's not too long unless Google makes some pretty massive movements pretty quickly. I see a world where Google gets completely frozen out of that search market if everybody defaults to asking their favorite AI agent for answers instead, and it remembers you and it remembers your history and it starts to know you and understand you, and it has access to your calendar and it has access to your email history and it has access to all your documents. I just feel like I'm sure Google is very aware of this risk, but is the danger that people move away from web search as it's traditionally known and move to agentic AI search instead?
I think ultimately, yes, that is a danger to Google. I think the one big thing that Google has in its corner is that people are very habit driven. And I think that there's a big difference between people like you and me who are in the technology space. We like to be on top of what's going on. We're going to be early adopters for things versus the vast majority of people who are just going about their regular, ordinary lives and jobs and aren't interested in that. And just they've been doing it a certain way for a long time. And so they're going to keep doing it that way for a long time. So I don't think that personally that within like next 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to see the majority of people moving over to starting their searches through AI platforms just because people are so habitual. But over time, and as AI first generation, as children grow up with, ChatGPT is just normal. The iPhone was normal if you were growing up in 2008. Internet's normal or whatever. There's always these big changes generationally. I think that is probably where the biggest changes will become. And it's, grandma uses Google, but no, obviously we use ChatGPT to find things and so forth.
And what would your advice be? So let's say you start working with a brand new client today. Maybe they've tried to do Google Ads in-house, or maybe they've worked with another agency before or whatever, and they're just going, we just don't see the ROI on this. We think there's better places we can spend our money to drive qualified traffic to our website. What are some of the first steps you take when someone comes to you for the very first time? Is it some sort of an account-based audit? Is it a website audit? Is it a full marketing mix audit to where you say, how does this fit in and how should it fit in with the rest of your marketing activities to where we can take a holistic approach to this? What is your typical engagement model to try to assess where the best opportunities sit for the brands that you work with?
Yeah, great question. So I would say currently, most people, when they first come to us, they're looking for help with something more specific. So it's not, hey, help me with all of these different marketing channels. It's more of like you mentioned, Google Ads isn't working well for me. We need help with that. And so generally speaking, we're doing an audit of what they've been doing. If they've been doing things, we'll also work with brand new businesses and new to advertising, in which case it's not about what have they been doing. It's about action plan for moving forward. But if they've been running advertising, it's okay. What's been good about what you've been doing? What's been bad? What are the areas of opportunity? Where are you wasting money? Where are you leaving money on the table? And that's in the ad account, that's on the website. And that is also looking bigger picture as well at, okay, you've got a bunch of terrible reviews that come up when people search for you. It doesn't matter how good your ads are. You're going to lose a lot of business because people go and look at reviews. And so you got to deal with that as well. So things like that, trying to look at things somewhat holistically. And it's figuring out, okay, what is the path forward to, again, cut that waste, identify those areas of opportunity, take action on them. And sometimes that's really easy. Like things are so bad, they've been so mismanaged that
That
it's
anything's an improvement.
super obvious. Exactly. It's yeah. Some of the things we see are just kind of mind-boggling. And then sometimes it's more of, hey, maybe they've gotten to a certain place with who they're working with right now, but they need to go to the next level, and they just need someone with more expertise, with more sophistication, more abilities to take things, to scale things, and get to the next place. And so it's figuring out really what are those pain points, what are those needs, and then customizing our solution to be sure that we're solving those needs.
And let's talk a little bit about YouTube advertising for a moment, because it feels like that is it's a unique opportunity for Google, because it's a unique property and because it's got such unique content, and because they're introducing new formats all the time, famously with shorts, etc. And I'm seeing 10x the views on my typical short versus my typical long form video. So they're clearly vigging shorts for the time being in terms of the results. We know it's the second most popular search engine in the world after Google itself. So it feels like YouTube for many brands is a golden opportunity but again, I think it's for most brands, it's a more complex area to have to create content for, to be able to run ads against or to be the ad itself. So it's probably a little bit harder for most brands to execute effectively on YouTube ads, but it also comes with a commensurate upside opportunity associated with it. So with most of your Meta Ads customers, are you doing YouTube ads with them as well as Google ads, separate Google property ads, or is it something where most brands still don't necessarily see the value in YouTube ads, so they're not willing to invest in it, or it's a little bit scary for them to think, God, do I need to set up a production studio to be able to do this at scale?
It's definitely still scary to a lot of brands. I would say probably the normal path, if we're looking at kind of channels and where brands start and go to, I would say probably starting usually with direct response on Google, so search, shopping, that kind of thing. And then from there, I'd say going to Meta, generally speaking. And then probably after that, going to YouTube. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but I'd say it's what I see most often. I think there's various reasons for that. Obviously, video is incredibly important on Meta as well. So if you're going to see really good results on Meta, generally that strategy is going to include some video. So there has to be some content creation. But I would also say, and it's far from perfect, but there's probably more direct attribution on the Meta ad side of things than on the YouTube side of things. On the YouTube side of things, there's not much direct attribution. And so you'll have brands, leap of faith may be too strong, but they have to get out of this mindset of here's the ROAS that we're going to achieve, and here's the orders that we know are coming from this campaign, and really understanding, no, you're not going to see a lot within Google Ads. You're going to spend money on YouTube. You're not going to see a lot, generally speaking, within Google Ads in terms of numbers. And so we need to be measuring differently. We need to be looking at your bottom line, your top line. We need to be looking about number of new customers that are coming in. Are we seeing more people aware of the brand and searching for the brand, and then those things converting through those lower funnel campaigns and things like that? But I think for the brands who have kind of that sophistication of perspective and that patience as well, and who are willing to invest into the content creation side of things, there are, like you said, outsized returns, because YouTube is a fantastic channel with a massive audience, great targeting capabilities, and a very seamless way to move people between the organic and the paid side of things. So you can run ads that then say, get people to subscribe to your channel because you have interesting content. And now you have a closer relationship, and they're going to keep seeing your organic content. And then you can run an ad to your subscribers to try and close the deal and get them actually to take action into your funnel. And so they just work together very nicely.
And what do you tell your clients that maybe come to you and they say, "Hey, look, we know that it's an MTA world. We know that it's not a funnel. It's not a line. A customer may have to be exposed to a brand 10 times. I think the average is seven. Data shows that roughly someone has to be exposed to your brand somewhere, somehow, roughly 7 times before there's any kind of recall associated with your brand and your products and the space that you play in." So do you encourage most of your clients, because we know that the analytics of each of these individual tools and platforms are inaccurate at best, and certainly push their own barrow at worst, and are trying to take credit for every single conversion or even chance at a conversion that comes through their platform, which makes sense. They're trying to prove ROI, right? At the end of the day. So everything is going to be heavily skewed in their favor in terms of the reporting and the analytics. So do you recommend that brands go with a platform like a Northbeam or a Triple Whale or some sort of MTA platform, or at least maybe a platform where they've got marketing mix modeling up and running somehow, or maybe a platform that does both, because there's a number of platforms out there that do both, and so that they can compare and say, look, okay, the data on the MTA side shows this, the data on the side shows this. So how can we compare, and how can we look backwards across our data and see what's actually working versus not working? How do you encourage your best clients that are seeing the best performance to better understand holistically what's working from a marketing perspective, with Google Ads, for example, being just one channel? And there's a lot of places for people to be able to spend money now, AppLovin and all these new channels. And when we think of Reddit, we think of lots of new and emerging channels. It's becoming very diffuse now where audiences are. And it's becoming, I think, harder than ever before to track ROI on ad spend because of that.
Absolutely it is. Yeah, no, it's very difficult. And first of all, we have to have a conversation with clients, with brands, that you are not going to get perfect attribution. That's not a thing. And so our goal here is to be directionally correct, to be as close as possible, to understand, okay, this is going the right direction, this isn't, versus, hey, you had 33 orders from this and 27 orders from that, and so forth. So I think that's already a hill that for some brands you have to get over, because they're used to this idea of assigning a channel to every single order and a keyword and whatnot, and that's just not how. I've worked with things like Northbeam, other attribution channels, or models, or modeler software, and so forth. And I have a perspective, not unique really to just Northbeam or any one specifically, but across all of them, I have concerns about leveraging them too much. And that's because they still are making a lot of assumptions in their modeling, and yet they're giving very concrete and specific answers to questions. They are saying X percentage of your revenue came from Facebook, X percent came from Google Ads, etc. And so what do brands do when they see that? They take that as gospel truth. It doesn't really matter how many times you say, hey, this is based on assumptions. They see the number and, hey, last month was bad. ROAS here was higher than there. Then it means that we should do this and not that. And sometimes that's accurate, but sometimes it's not. And I think it can be very easy to start making decisions that you think are not based upon assumptions, but that actually are. And then that can quickly extrapolate to some really problematic places. I don't have a perfect answer for it, because I don't think there is a perfect answer. What we do with a lot of our brands, we definitely look at things like media efficiency ratio. So looking at, okay, how much money are you making? How much are we spending in marketing? And how are those things changing, and the efficiency of those things changing as we move money between channels, between types of campaigns? We'll look at things like cost per new customer acquisition. How many of your clients or customers are returning? How are those rates changing? Are we really getting lots of new customers into your base, or is most of what's coming back just on the returning side of things, which means most of our advertising is just grabbing people that already know about you and probably is not being efficiently spent, things like that. And so it's a very nuanced conversation and a challenging conversation, because there aren't a lot of perfect or necessarily right answers out there, in my opinion.
What, to your way of thinking, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you're really excited about from a Google Ads platform perspective? Is, because I'm not in this space, has Google announced anything that they're working on right now that, say, over the next 6, 12, 18 months, you're going, man, I cannot wait for this to be released, because it's going to make our jobs and our lives easier, and it's going to be better for our clients that we work with? Is there anything on your radar that just gets you really excited in an outsized way?
There's 3 things that come to mind. The first is, in theory, they're going to introduce ads into AI overviews, which they've been talking about for a while, and we don't have an exact detail on that, but that has the potential to be massive, because they serve ad overviews so often. So many people are engaging with that. And right now, there's no advertising component to that. So that's something that we're monitoring and thinking about very closely. The second thing I would say is there have been some positive trends towards more transparency and control in the campaigns we can run within Google Ads, which is a departure from what normally the trend has been. Normally, Google has been pushing more towards black box, trust the machine, like we talked about earlier with analytics. And there's been some really positive changes, especially with a type of campaign called performance max campaigns, which has historically been very much that, a black box. You tell Google a few things, it goes out and makes decisions. And now they've been gradually giving us more insight into where are the ads serving, what are the ads looking like, giving options to say, I don't want my ads serving here, or hey, let's change this and stuff like that. So that's been positive, and I hope we continue to see Google going in that direction. And then the last thing, which I would say I know the least about right now, is they have recently released something called Meridian, which is more on that attribution modeling side of things, trying to solve some of those issues. And I haven't really dived deep into that yet, so I can't really share a perspective on how good it is or how it works. But that is something that I need to dive into a lot further, because they are trying to solve some of those attribution issues that we just talked about.
And do you think Google, and maybe they already do, and I'm just not aware of it because they've been quiet about it, do you think Google will ever do specific deals with major global retail media networks? Because retail media seems to be getting a lot of airtime. I got friends that work over at Zitcha and a couple of other major retail media networks that are global in nature. They have hundreds of thousands, or in some cases millions of placements within retail spaces, etc. But it feels like, I distinctly remember, this is probably going back 15 years ago, that Google was saying, hey, we're going to be able to, this was when digital screens were being added to things like bus stops, and they were saying, hey, we're gonna start bringing into the Google Ad Manager platform, we're going to start bringing these physical placement opportunities, whereas maybe you would run, for example, the same type of ad that you would run on YouTube. We're now going to be able to push those out to these screens around the world at a cheaper price than anybody, because we're going to effectively pre-negotiate on your behalf with these vendors for placements. And obviously, if there's a gap in time where there's no placement, that's going to be a cheap placement versus when it's booked up for years in advance. And so instead of having to go out and create relationships with all these independent media networks and placement specialists and billboard screen specialists and all that sort of stuff, Google for a long time said, we want to be that for everyone, everywhere, all the time, including physical spaces. But it never really happened, at least as far as I'm aware. It never came to fruition. But I feel like with retail media networks, there's emerging some really big winners in that space. And it feels like they would only need to do deals with maybe 10 companies as opposed to 1 million companies. And have you heard any noise about that? Because it always seemed like that was a natural way for Google to get its talons into the physical space.
Yeah, fantastic question. I haven't heard noise about that recently. I will say that I don't spend a lot of time on kind of the programmatic side of Google, which would be more in that space. And so there may be some things that there may already be some partnerships and things in that space that I'm not personally aware of. So I don't want to say there aren't, because there might be. But I will say that Google definitely has a track record of trying to get their ads as many places as possible. They have a long track record of having many partnerships. Their search partner network, the whole Sense, their Google Display Network, is all about third-party placements. And they also have a lot of experience now with ads on various screens that are not phones or computers with YouTube. And YouTube is used across every screen imaginable, lots of top TV and so forth. So I would think it very likely that they are trying as hard as they can to get additional inventory, because that's one of the levers they have to make more money, is just get more inventory. There's only so many ads you can serve, but if you have more places you can serve those ads, you can make more money. So I would think yes.
I love it. I love it. Listen, though, an hour has absolutely flown by. I've learned so much. It's been such a fascinating conversation. And like I said, you're living in this space every single day, and I don't. And so I always appreciate the insights from somebody who's an expert in their field of endeavor and expertise. So I really appreciate that. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile as well as your website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to speak to you about all things Google ads, all things AI in Google, and where they should be looking next for ROI in their digital marketing efforts, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn and our website are great places to get a hold of me. And then I would say too, we put a lot of content on our YouTube channel. So just search StubGroup on there. We're always talking about these types of things. And so as I think about things and put out content, you'll find it on there.
I love it. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. What is your question for me today?
I'm going to take advantage of that to ask you a question about podcasting because and I enjoy podcasting. I have my own podcast over at StubGroup. And so how should I phrase this? When you are conducting an interview and you're trying to get helpful information for your audience from the guests that you're working with, what is the thing that you try to prevent the guest from doing? If that makes sense. Like when you're guiding that conversation, when you see a guest going in one direction, where is that a red flag? And what do you do to try and course correct and get back to where you want the conversation to go?
Great question. And I would say that I try to front run that to prevent it from happening by ensuring that the guests that I get on, that we do not do a prep call. We do not agree a discussion points. We do not agree a list of questions beforehand. I have total editorial control over my podcast, and I'll stop running a podcast if that ever ceases to be the case. And one of the reasons why I took that stance from the very beginning is because I wanted my podcast to be conversational. I wanted it to be authentic, and I didn't want it to feel contrived. And I would say a good 30 to 40% of the guests that ask to be on the podcast or that I ask to be on the podcast as a guest, they'll say, hey, can we have a pre-call, or can you send a list across to us of the questions you're going to ask during the podcast so that I can send it to legal, or so that I can send it to my marketing team, or so that I can get it approved by my CEO, or whatever it might be, right? And so that's why the longer that I've gone on with my podcast, the more I have focused on CEOs or CXOs across the board, leaders of companies, as opposed to marketing people or ops people or whatever, because I find that they have more freedom to speak freely than just a run-of-the-mill employee in a business. Not to say that those employees don't have really valuable things to share. It's just jumping through the hoops to get them to speak openly is really difficult. And so when I'm speaking to founders or CEOs or COOs or chief product officers or things like that, it's just so much easier to have that authentic conversation because they don't need approval for it from anybody. They just speak their mind, right? And it's that simple. And so I have taken that stance right from day one. But when you're a young podcast, you have to take what you can get in terms of guests, because you don't have the track record to be considered legitimate yet. But once you get to 100, 200, 300, 400 podcast episodes, people go, okay, he's not just a fly-by-night podcaster, because pod fade is a thing. Something like 90% of podcasts never get past episode 20. And then I think it's 99% of podcasts never get past episode 50. So once you've been in the game for a while, it becomes easier to get leadership level guests than when you're first starting out. You gotta just ask 100 people and you get what you get. So that would be what I would say is I try to prevent it ever going down a path that would be uncomfortable for me or my guests. And I don't want it to be uncomfortable for them either. And so I try to say, look, let's not pre-plan this. Let's just have a real human to human conversation, and let's just see where this leads, naturally speaking. And that's how I've tried to keep the authenticity in the pod.
I love it. Thank you for sharing, Jason.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.